Good morning. My name is Margot Wilson. I'm a retired anthropologist from the University of Victoria, and I'm also the owner and editor of Castle Carrington Publishing Group. The Castle Carrington Publishing Group is an umbrella company. Our imprints include Transgender Publishing, Stephanie Castle Publications, Perceptions Press, and All Genders Press. And if you've seen, there's a table out in the hall. Please go talk to my assistant, who's also my daughter, is out there, and her assistant, who is her daughter, is also out there. So I encourage you to go and look at the books that are out there if you're interested. I have to make a confession. Castle Carrington Publishing Group actually started here at Moving Trans History Forward in 2014. And like you, I was sitting in the audience as an audience member at the Elders Panel. I think we also called it the Founders Panel or the Pioneers Panel or something like that. And I was so struck by the stories that were being told by the people on the panel that I was inspired to start collaborating with some of those people to write their life stories. And as they say, that's history, and here we are. Castle Carrington Publishing Group has grown out of all of that. So I'm placing the blame strictly and squarely on Aaron DeVore and his conference. It's his fault that we're here. I am delighted to introduce our panel today. This is a group of authors who are all working with Castle Carrington Publishing Group. What I would like to say is that the authors are both fictional authors and non-fictional authors, so you're going to get a sort of pastiche, if you will, of the kinds of publishing that's being done by the company. And I don't see those as sort of binary categories, fiction and non-fiction. I think that they are part of a continuum, that after all, as authors, we write what we know, and so much of our fiction is autobiographical at some level. So I'm going to introduce the speakers to you in the order that they're going to be speaking. Charley Burton. Hello, Charley. I think you can't see me. Well, maybe you can see me. I'm waving anyway. Charley is a native of Charlottesville, Virginia. He's the owner of Charley Speaks, where he undertakes speaking engagements and training. Through his storytelling and inspirational chats, Charley introduces audiences to what it's like to be a Black trans man living in the South. Charley recently created an organization called Black Trans Men Can Cook. And through this organization, Charley works with Black trans men to develop cooking skills and healing relationships with food. This group was inspired by Charley's lifelong battle with food addiction. Charley has 2 books coming out, hopefully this fall. One is a collaboration with other trans men. It is entitled Trans Men Can Cook. And the other is his personal cookbook based on his mother's amazing recipes called Celebration: Recipes and Life Lessons from Leona's Kitchen. Charley is a board member of PFLAG of the Blue Ridge and is currently enrolled in Morehouse College, where in March of 2022 he was voted Morehouse Man of the Month by his peers. Currently, Charley's life story, The Boy Beneath My Skin, is available on Amazon. It's also out on the table in the hall if you're interested. It's a story about surviving abuse, addiction, mental illness, and gender dysphoria. In the end, the book reveals one man's indomitable spirit to recover and live a rich life. Although this is not one man's story, it is in many ways the story of all of us. Veronica Zerrer, who's also joining us online, is the author of Memoirs of a Cold Warrior. I believe that's the first in a trilogy of novels that she's got planned. She retired from the U.S. Army in 1998 after over 22 years of active service and reserve service. In the Army, she held various U.S. and overseas assignments at the battalion, brigade, and division levels with the Army's 1st and 35th Infantry Divisions. She's a graduate of Kansas State University and courses at the U.S. Army's Command and General Staff College. In her civilian career, she managed a homeless shelter, a home maintenance program that kept seniors in their own homes. She was a development director for a nonprofit agency. She was the tribal grant writer for the Prairie Band, and I'm going to ruin this, Potawatomi, she's going to correct me after this, Potawatomi Nation in Kansas. She's a past board president of the Trans Family Support Services and is currently co-chair of the San Diego LGBT Center Veterans Wall of Honor, a program honoring the military service of local LGBT citizens. Ronnie Gordon, who's joining us at the table, is a retired experimental neuropsychophysiologist. Did I get that right? Now living in Vancouver, BC. Growing up in Western Canada in the 1970s, she eventually attended several post-secondary institutions on the West Coast and obtained a doctorate in psychology, specializing in musical cognition. Using novel neuroimaging devices, her research focused on auditory function, memory, and disorders associated with post-viral syndromes, which is appropriate for the time being. A brief academic career was abandoned in favor of the private sector as a clinical applications specialist. An avid athlete, an outdoor enthusiast, triathlons, long-distance hiking, kayaking, cross-country skiing, and marveling at being human now fill her daily routine. Her book, Emerging from Stealth, has just been published last month. And in fact, the books literally arrived when I was here yesterday morning. I got a photograph from UPS with showing the box on the front door. So they are also out on the table in the hall, along with the books of all the other authors on the panel and other publications as well, of course. So I encourage you to go out and see Candace or Kay. They're available here in paperback, but you can also pick up, there are cards on the table. You can order them on Amazon if you're interested in any of the books we have available, either in paperback or in ebook format. Nikita Carter.
You have a daughter, so I guess you're, because transgender operation doctors can't give.
You please ask me after the session. We're short on time. Thank you. Okay, Nikita Carter is a talented musician, lyrical and inventive improviser. I have so much trouble with that word, Nikita. I need to take lessons. She was the founder and leader of Vancouver's renowned Now Orchestra, with multiple recordings and touring internationally. The breadth of her music includes extensive work with dance, spoken word, choral groups, intercultural music, electronics, and she is a prolific composer for a variety of instrumentations, from saxophone quartet to large ensembles. She's a performer, band leader, composer, producer, and educator. Nikita is a trans woman who emerged 7 years ago at the age of 63. She shares her story in her book called Both Sides of the Great Divide, which is expected to come out in the fall of this year. So we're very excited about that. Over the last 5 years, Nikita has been an advocate for trans folks at UBCP ACTRA, CFM 145, and with the Canadian Senior Artists Network. Last but not least, H.W. Coyle is the youngest of 3 children and the only son of an only son of an only son. So as she says, she started out in something of a hole. Haley says, from an early age, I found myself dealing with a conundrum. Physically, I knew I was male, and yet I was unable to identify with any of the traditional views and desires associated with being male. Growing up in the late 50s and early 60s meant that I didn't have access to a great deal of information concerning my dilemma. So I left home in 1967 when I was 15 and never really looked back. How I survived those years during my best efforts is something I attribute to a combination of divine intervention and pure dumb Irish luck. That I was afforded an opportunity to start over again was chiefly due to the intervention of a Marine colonel who served as something as a mentor. With his help, I secured an ROTC scholarship, acceptance to a fine, respected, and very strict Southern institution, and even did a term at Oxford. After graduating in 1974, I embarked upon a military career that took me to all sorts of picturesque spots around the world. My 17-year military career came to an end in 1991 when I had something of an epiphany during the Gulf War. Upon returning home, I began a slow, arduous journey that eventually led to where I had always wanted to go. In the 1980s, Haley was a member, thank you, of several trans support groups, including IFGE, Tri-S, and Tiffany House. In 1991, she took up writing full-time. Haley is a prolific author. She currently has 8 novels published with Transgender Publishing. Another will be out by the end of April. I think it's in the review process right now. And she has another 6 or 7 under agreement with the company at the present time. So please join me in welcoming our panel.
So I guess I'm on, right, Margot?
You are on.
I'm on. Okay. All right. Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Charley Burton. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia. Please do not hold that against me. Yeah. But first of all, I just want to put this out there in that Margot Wilson helped me become even a different person in the last 2 years than what I thought I could be. I always felt that I had words that needed to be heard, but I did not have the confidence to be able to put those on paper, let alone to create a book. And it was at this conference a couple of years ago that Margot typed in the chat box that I was on a panel with the esteemed Xander Craig and Jameson Green and just an amazing man, Jude Patton. And Margot asked if I would be interested in writing my book. And, you know, here I am today. So this country boy in Charlottesville, Virginia would have never dreamed that I would be here on a Saturday afternoon speaking to this esteemed group of people. So my book is The Boy Beneath My Skin. It's a tough read for the first couple of chapters. As a child, I experienced things no child should ever experience, but many do who are in my community. And I lived as a victim for so many years, but I put that victim-ish words into on paper, and a lot of the stuff that Margot had in the book, we just pretty much transferred over from my journals. Some of those journals I wrote when I was drunk. I am a recovering alcoholic. I celebrate in May 17 years. A lot of it that I was under the influence of drugs, and a lot of it was I was under the influence of extreme mental illness. I was somebody who, as I call doctors, psychiatrists, white coats, the white coats had said that I would never survive. I would probably not even be alive. And if I did, I would be someone who would basically live off of some type of disability and not be able to function in the world as a human being. And so I will tell you that I showed them with the tenacity and the spirit that I found out I had, they were wrong. What Margot Wilson has done for us here in the States is that there are a group of young men who know they have stories, and now they know there's someone like Margot who is so willing to listen to these Black men and their horrific stories. And that's what it takes to be a publisher who wants to be in a diverse world. You know, Margot could very easily pigeonhole her publishing company to just a certain type of group of trans people, but her love for that diverse community is that she is so willing to be able to open up. And she does not know the doors that she's beginning, the Transgender Publishing and Carrington Publishing is going to open up for just people here, not only in Virginia, but we have people all over the U.S. that are asking, you know what, I've read Charley's story. Who is this person that did this? Can I get in touch with her? You know, it takes a village. I have no idea how I even first met Jude Patton and how Jude Patton knew of me, but we met and we did some work of him and Margot's project of Transcestors. I was in on that part of that series as well. And, you know, I've been sitting thinking all morning about just the amazing miracle that has happened, that I am now a published author and getting ready to work on 2 more books. And so, you know, I could read to you out of my book, but I don't want to read. I want you to go buy it. so I'm not going to give you a free snippet to go buy my book. I mean, Margot was like, well, you could read a chapter out of it. And I was thinking, no, Margot, I'm not going to read a chapter out of it. Make them go, make them be a little curious and go out there and spend those dollars and buy that book. And I will tell you, as a salesperson, I used to be a great salesperson, you will not be disappointed in this book. You'll read this book thinking that this person is going to be dead at the end. But here I am, alive, an honor student. I have a 4.0 average going into my third semester at Morehouse. These are all things that I never thought that I would be able to do, let alone write a book. And so, I don't know what all you want from me. Is that I'm a country boy that I just love the simple things in life, but I have had an extraordinary life. And my life has become extremely extraordinary by meeting Margot Wilson. So if you've got a story and you think you want it told, hit her up. Because Margot and I tease Margot. I stopped paying therapists after I started meeting Margot. We meet once a week. Just like you would with a therapist. And it's, an hour. Sometimes if we get real animated, it's 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. And she doesn't charge me anything extra like a therapist would, but I don't have to pay for a therapist right now because I've got Margot, and I say that jokingly, but I also say that with all earnestness, is that being able to meet with Margot once a week and get that stuff out and get that on paper like we did. Quickly, I'll share. I'm not a guy that's afraid of a lot of stuff, but I'm telling you, the day that Margot said we can push the button and the book is ready, I'm telling you, that was the biggest fear because I didn't know how the community was going to take the book. I didn't even know how I was going to take the book. That it was going to be, here it was going to be shipped to me, and there's a book in my hand with a picture of me of the 8-year-old kid sitting on my front steps, hiding from my mother because I didn't want to put a dress on to go shopping. And that's where they found me, on the steps of the and my sister took the picture. But what has happened is that this book is... it has helped so many people. It has helped people see that they have a story, but it's also helped a lot of guys in my community, especially the Black trans guys, say, you know what, I went through this and I can survive this too. So, Margot's paying me very well to be able to say all these nice things about her. And so, I'll just finish off in saying that, Margot, I love you. I thank you for creating this author. And then the last thing is that, save your dollars, because we've got 2 more books coming out. We discovered that there were some young men who had stories about the kitchen, and they had recipes, but their stories were so horrific. There's one young man that says, I want to be able to tell the story, but I don't know if I can, because the reason I didn't like to be in the kitchen and I don't like to cook for myself is because the kitchen was the place that I got abused by someone in my household. These are the strong stories just surrounding around the food in the kitchen. And then the other book, which is my personal book that I'm putting out, is that it is a labor of love between my mother and I. And you'll read in my book, we didn't have that in the beginning. It was the last few years of her life, after I'd really found out who I authentically was, is that we grew a love for each other. And so she would tell me all these stories surrounding around the chocolate cake. There's a chocolate cake in the book that's going to talk about how at the age of 18, she would make the cake for everybody until they got 18 years of age. And after you got 18, you made your own cake on your birthday. And then you did that for the rest of your life. And so these are just wonderful stories from a Black Southern woman who had a 7th grade education, but was brilliant in my eyes. And so we're creating that. And that's the stuff that Transgender Publishing is doing. So you're making strides, Margot, not only in Canada, but you're going all across the world. And I love you and I thank you. And I'll shut up for now.
So can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I am Veronica Zerrer. I was born in Kansas on a farm, and I was raised as a normal or a common Kansas farm kid. I learned how to ride a horse. I learned how to drive a tractor before I learned how to drive a truck. And finally, Dad trusted me with the family car. I chased manhood all the way through my youth. I played football or tried to play football. I joined the Army. I loved baseball, and I chased girls. Nothing worked. It finally took me about 35 years, which is probably not a strange story for everybody here, but it took me 35 years to finally have a conversation with myself. And finally, after that conversation, I met who I really was. And it had been building up inside of me ever since I was 4 or 5 years of age. But once again, I was running towards manhood, thinking that that would save me and a forever love would save me. One of the things I was asked is why we write. And I know the big reason for me why I write is that I want to see the stories that I would like to read. And in my literary development, my literary history, I guess I would say, my major influencers are a number of authors, and I'm gonna list them here because I think they're people that meant a lot to me. And I think for all writers, we have our literary heroes. The first three are Edmund Blunden, Siegfried Sassoon, and Robert Graves. And these were all World War I soldiers. And what they did was they wrote about their war memoirs, but they put them in sometimes fictional form and autobiographical form. There's also Thomas Hardy. He could milk tragedy. And I think that's the reason why people love tragedies so much, is because they make us feel so human, because we experience the pathos of loss and we experience the joy of achieving something or achieving the love of someone. Willa Cather, she was just right up the road from me across the border in Nebraska. And that's where she wrote of O Pioneers and Antonia. There's also, I guess, there's two more that I really have to mention, and one is Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler is probably one of the finest writers of speculative fiction I have ever read in my life. And if you've never read Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, those are two of her strongest books. And I'm currently rereading Kindred, which is just a magnificent read. And lastly, I'll say Annie Ernaux. Annie Ernaux was a big influence on my life. And I remember reading her, a translation of her about 5 years ago. And I thought to myself, why isn't she a Nobel laureate? And lo and behold, she became a Nobel laureate this year. So I'm going to be quiet for now. But I just want to say also, I want to echo the accolades to Margot for all of her work and all of her efforts at publishing trans authors, because we all do have stories to tell. And my advice is get those pens out and that paper filled up, because you've got a story to tell, and write it. Thank you.
See if I can do this. Help! I got it. Finally, I got it. Ronnie?
Oh.
This is you.
Oh, I'm next. Oh, hello, everyone. Well, welcome to the conference. I'm from Port Moody. That is, I believe, the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Brief political plug for the Tsleil-Waututh. They are caretakers of the Burrard Inlet. We have a $17 billion pipeline that's going to dump a bunch of oil into that inlet. We'll see. So I want to thank also Margot for being such a champion of authors. I sent her a manuscript I did about 20 years ago. It was essentially, well, the title was The Cheater's Manifesto. It was dabbling into atheism and this concept that humans, like all animals, prefer to cheat. And so deception and detection of deception was critical to our evolutionary process. Margot read that book, or seemed to know what I was saying. That book has been on Amazon for 20 years. There has not been a single download. So it's only 66 cents, so now's your chance. It's still up there. So I think I've bought it twice just to make sure it's still working. So in 2018, I came to this conference and I did a little lecture on my life at the time, which was essentially living in stealth mode. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the term, but if you're not, it's essentially I lived a double life. I was a professor and as far as everybody knew, cisgendered, accomplished researcher, international, but at the same time, on my spare time, I became Ronnie, and I went to bars and restaurants and navigated the world as a woman. So at that time in 2018, if everybody remembers my final slide, the stealth mode showed a very large amplitude sine wave. Nikita knows what a sine wave is. Would you like to explain? No. So basically, when I was Ron, I'm up here, and as Ronnie, I'm down here, or vice versa, you know, in terms of mood and how I felt. So I retired. I actually did not retire by choice. I was working with a very large corporation who decided to change my role as someone who was quite, I thought, well respected in the clinical community. We looked at neurosurgery for epileptic tissue and brain localization, and the corporation decided not to do that anymore. So as it turns out, I no longer had a job. So basically, I sat on my porch for about 8 years, thinking what to do next. And those were all the hobbies: kayaking, hiking, cycling. But now I got bored, and I said, well, let's explore the transition. And that's the story that's in the book here. And I think I will read something just because I think it's funny. And I hope you think it's funny too, because it's something that we're faced with today, is teaching youth about their sexuality. My sexuality went off the deep end. You know what I'm thinking. So, because I'm going to read you that section as how confused it was, because I just wasn't sure what was going on, and I was hiding. And I only exist here today because of one single chance event. And I'm going to tell you what that event is. Oh, the mic, sure. Yes. Reading glasses. Reading glasses, very critical. I think I can try with one hand. All right, so we're going to go back to 1977. Anybody there? Remember disco and Kiss and rock and roll? It was a wonderful time because there was no AIDS. The drug supply wasn't toxic. We basically spent our days, our high school days, looking for substances to ingest, whatever anybody in the parking lot gave us. There's one of my favorite moments in my book is that teachers don't ask high schoolers to do dangerous stuff after lunch, because we were all stoned after lunch. That's when you'd come in and you'd get the supply. So everything from whatever it was, acid, mushrooms, marijuana, we all did it. And I'm happy to report my entire peer group are now professionals and well established in the community and making millions of dollars. So there you go. All right, so everything changed for me one fateful day in grade 9. And just as one of the neat things, I think I was a Toastmaster, and they have this category called voice modulation. So I rarely break my voice when I'm in one gender or the other, but I'm going to do it here just for fun, because I know if I was in a Toastmasters competition, I'd win the voice modulation section. So I'm going to see. I've never done this before, so I'll see if I can do it. Hey, Ron, you got to read this, exclaimed my overly zealous comrade in delinquency. Aw, come on. It's a book. Books are for fags. I reiterated our credo to my questionably growing cohort of society dropout, street hockey playing outcasts. No, come on, Ron, take a look. She sighed breathlessly, then inhaled deeply while reaching for his enormous, throbbing, fully erect. Beep. Whoa, what kind of book is this? Score. My 15-year-old pals had found a porn novel. There's a bit of a footnote here. There's an author that wrote over 400 porn novels. His name was John Cleave. So very prolific in the early 70s, if you were there. These novels were all over the place. Somebody dropped one off in the schoolyard. I cannot remember how many times I read it, but pretty sure that single book improved my reading skills by a factor of 10. I astounded myself by reading 100 pages a day. Unexpectedly, writing became easy, and I made it through grade 9 English, no problem. I became adept at stealing the nouns and adjectives from descriptive pornography to embed into school assignments. Or you could take the entire sentence from pornographic descriptions, replace the nouns, mix up the words, connect a few phrases to fit the answer to whatever we were supposed to have read. I astonished myself when I received back an assignment. Excellent work, and is mortified when I had to read it in front of the class. It went something like this. Margot was probably, why does he keep editing this paragraph? Since I only have a minute left, I'll just start. But this was my 1977 award-winning Moonship. The forbiddingly humongous and powerful Moonship with its massive and magnificent erect mast, piercing the damp and moist, dimly lit sky, thrust slowly forward, deliberately, yet inching with tender care towards the sumptuous awaiting dock, rocking rhythmically side to side, softly caressing the silky waters beneath its solid hull. And on it went, A+. Whoa, you see, grade 9 English is a piece of cake. And I think I heard one of my buddies snicker. So that's why I'm an author. Thank you. All right, Nikita has requested I turn this off because I think we're going to get feedback. This is a beautiful, could you describe your horn for a little bit? This is a beautiful instrument.
Is it on? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I've been so moved by being here the last few days. I was going to speak. I'd written some text, and that was a month ago, 2 months ago while I was in Mexico, and then I wrote it again. And then I got here, and I threw it all away. And I played that song just because it came to me yesterday, and it ends with wretch like me, and now I can see, you know? And I feel like so many of us are learning to see and see more clearly. And I hear so many stories about seeing our own story, our own truth. You know, I hear his story, her story, our story. And then I think of my story, and in the words of great musician Sun Ra, he talks about my story is mystery, and this unveiling of mystery, and this journey, and this sharing, and this building, and this community that I felt. You know, I turned 7 in 2 weeks. I transitioned, and I'm always joking and saying I'm 7, and I dress so inappropriately. I dress like a teenager, and I kind of think, why would that be? And I said, well, trans years is 3 trans years for a person. So I'm 21 now, but a couple of years ago I was dressing like a 16-year-old, and I was, you know, so I'm kind of trying to process so many things in what's going on for me over these last 7 years. And, you know, my story, I get all the time, you know, why did you transition at 63? And, you know, here I am looking at 70, and I've got the wisdom and experience of somebody who's lived 7 decades. And I lived till I was 60 with white privilege, a privileged white male who knew how to walk in the world with power and how to wield that and knew what it was to be deferred to. And now I'm on the other side of that privilege. And so my book is going to be called, it's coming out, I'm hoping this autumn, Both Sides of the Great Divide, because I'm living on a lot of different sides, the gender divide, the age divide. I feel like a child in so many ways, learning and hearing elders speak who have been involved for so many years in the struggle. Who's come before me? Who are, you know, whose shoulders am I standing upon? I'm really trying to endeavor, kind of what I'm realizing, it's really important for me to have more questions than answers. I have some wisdom, but I'm also the greatest way to learn is by realizing, you know, I know nothing. And I'm trying to have my actions be congruent with my values. And that, for me, has for a long time been a rallying cry in my life for the last 30 years, is that I'm trying to act with, as has been spoken of many times, over the last few days of having, going through the world with goodwill and kindness and openness and willingness to learn. And so I'm trying to bring that, and I'm trying to bring the knowledge and the elder wisdom I have to be an advocate for those that are younger. It's really inspiring to see so many young people here who are grappling with this divide and how to make sense of it for their own lives in the same way I am. And I have the benefit of having learned some things through my life and my experience. 50 years as a musician. I've been looking all my life through music and improvised music to, improvised music is about having your own voice and expressing your voice. And it was that search to find my voice. And I have my voice in music. And now I'm living my voice. I'm Nikita. I am my voice now. It's not externalized. And I'm able to use the skills that I have as a musician and improviser and composer and as an elder in the music community, as a teacher and producer and all these things. And I'm trying to make sense of how to utilize all these threads, you know. I had, what prompted my transition was I was broken open with a number of events that happened in a very short period of time. My oldest friend died. 2 months later, my mom died. I was in a head-on car accident. I was in bed in terrible pain for several years, and became very depressed. And with some guidance and some therapy, I was able to look back and see some early damage that had happened that had made me armor myself in a way that Nikita was not able to emerge. And it was with this therapy that I was able to kind of look back in time down this hallway of mirrors and see her at the end of it and realize that she'd always been there, but had been hidden behind the lack of safety that was possible for me to emerge. And so it's been a real journey of trying to lift her up and to be alive with that. And so this has been my way. Writing was just a way I couldn't find mental health support of people that could understand what it was like for someone my age to be processing all this stuff. And so my way was just to write about it and to kind of get it out and to talk to my dear ones, some very close friends. So it's just been a process of writing it down, sharing my story, my insights around, family, learning, friends, and so on. And I've been kind of invisible by my world that I have had for a long time. So it's an opportunity for me now, with my skills, with my new community. I really feel bonded and connected with being here. This is like I'm saying the last few days, these are my people. I really feel safe here. I feel loved and I feel welcomed and I feel connected. And for me, it really is about lifting one's consciousness, and every atom in me is connected to every atom in you and everywhere. And so it's this interconnection and desire to raise consciousness in myself and to be part of the change that I want to see in this planet that we have to do. And as someone who's an elder and a kid, as a younger, to start engaging in that process and finding allies and building alliances. And I'm so grateful for my friendship with Margot. And, she hasn't seen anything I've written, not one line. And I know that she's just, things take time and they will be in their time, in their process. And I'm so grateful for that trust and the kindness. And, if I never published a word, I've found a really deep, loving friend, and I'm very excited. I'm excited to have this book come out, and I don't know, I'll kind of just leave it at that. Anyway, thank you.
Gee, I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to follow all those people, but I'll give it a shot. In 1951, novelist Mickey Spillane responded to a question of why he wrote material some readers, and including his own father, found distasteful. He said, "I write the kind of stuff I like to read but can't find. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't write it." C.S. Lewis, author of the Chronicles of Narnia, was quoted as saying, "I wrote books I would have liked to have read if I could have gotten them. That's always been my reason for writing. People won't write books I want, so I have to do it." Toni Morrison, a fierce defender of language, knew everyone's story has a right to be told, even in a world that might tell you it doesn't have a place. She said, "Write the book you want to read." Her brand of bravery and courage goes hand in hand with the advice of pursuing the story you want to see on the shelf but currently don't.